Base coating is one of the fundamentals of miniature painting, so let's show you exactly how to do it. We're going to be using this Gnoll Witherling from Wizkids, which is a great sculpt. I was unaware that models could be cast using chewing gum, however, but here we are. As a beginner, you're often told to thin your paints, but knowing exactly how much to thin your paints and how much to apply is the tricky part, especially when you're learning. So there is an easier way to figure this out. So when you put your paint onto a palette, whether it's a wet palette or a dry palette, doesn't matter, and you drag your brush through, you'll notice that it starts to leave lines, it starts to leave ridges in the paint. This means that the paint is too thick. So what you want to do is just add water in small increments until the paint starts to settle on the palette. So you can see add a little bit here, and the paint is slowly starting to go back into its natural liquid form, if you like. It's not leaving that many ridges, but there are still a few. So you just want to add a little bit more water. See here? It's no longer leaving the ridges in the paint. So this means this is thinned enough now to do a base coat. If you're not sure about how much water to add, and you might accidentally add too much water, that's okay. It's better to have too thin a paint than too thick a paint. So applying it to an actual miniature, if you've thinned the paint correctly, and feel free to just keep trying to thin paint until you can get it right. The key with applying it to a miniature is that you don't touch it once you've applied a brush stroke. So you put your brush stroke down and don't mess with it until it's dry. Even if you've missed a spot, don't worry about it. You can always go back over it with another coat, and I do need to go back over it with another coat for this paint. Not all paints are equal. This is the thing to remember. This is why you want to rely on a thinning method that goes with an actual sort of physical texture and physical attribute, rather than just simply adding 2 drops of water, because just adding 2 drops of water might not work for a paint that's a bit thicker and will be too much for a paint that's a bit thinner. If you do it this way, you can actually adjust how much you thin to the type of paint that you're using. If you mess with the paint before it's dried, you'll start to move bits around that have dried and things that haven't dried, and you'll get unwanted texture, lumps, bumps and bits, all sorts of odd things in your paint, and it'll start to look really, really rough. So things like this Death Guard green here doesn't have the highest amount of pigment in it. So when you thin it to a correct degree, you'll still need to add another coat afterwards. But that's fine. So you do your one coat, move around the model as much as you can so that you're putting a brush stroke down and then moving to another section to put another brush stroke down, and just giving things time to dry without moving half-dried paint around too much. Sometimes you'll find things like Games Workshop air paints are already thinned to a point where you can put a base coat down, so they can be quite handy, such as their metallic paints. Their air lead belcher is pretty much spot on for doing a metallic base coat straight from the pot, but always put it onto a palette first so you can actually see what the paint is doing and whether you actually need to thin it. Once you've got something like this, then just leave it to dry. If you load up the brush too much, that's okay. That comes with practice. The fact that we've thinned the paint correctly means it won't matter. It'll dry, it'll settle on the model and settle into the crevices. You can see there, that's what it should look like. That's one coat. So that will need another coat, and we do the same with the second coat. So it's thinned exactly the same way. And we just go in and fix all the spots that we missed. Just give the whole thing another coat. This is what it looks like. You've got all your base coats down. Now, it takes some practice to get nice clean lines and nice smooth base coats, but thinning your paints properly is a very, very good start. So, I hope that was of use to somebody, and feel free to subscribe if you think I've earned it, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.